Welcome! Today, we're taking a deep dive into a really fascinating topic, the intricate, multi-layered strategy that has propelled India to the very top of the global chess world. You see, this isn't just a story about raw talent. It's about a system, a blueprint for dominance, really. So, what kicked all this off? Well, it was the 2024 Budapest Chess Olympiad. India did something truly historic there, something only the Soviet Union and China had ever done before. They won double gold in both the open and the women's sections. I mean, this wasn't just another win. This was a massive statement, a declaration that they had well and truly arrived. So that brings us to the big question, right? Was this just a fluke? A happy coincidence where a so-called golden generation just happened to pop up all at the same time? Or is this the culmination of a consciously built system, a national project that's been decades in the making? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the birth of this chess superpower, digging into its Soviet foundations and what's known as the Anand effect. Next, we'll get into the system itself, specifically how they've de-risked making a career out of chess. Then, we'll go inside the factory, looking at the teaching methods and the patrons behind the scenes. And to wrap it all up, we'll talk about the future of this incredible national project.
So to really get a handle on the champions we see today, we've got to rewind the clock a bit. Long before this current generation burst onto the scene, some really crucial seeds were planted. And it all starts with a connection you might not expect, one that dates back to the Cold War.
This timeline really shows the long game here. It all kicks off way back in 1972. That's when Manoel Aron, who was India's first international master, founded something called the Tal Chess Club. And get this, it was inside Chennai's Soviet Cultural Center. This was huge because it gave a whole generation of Indian players access to elite Soviet chess theory for the first time. It was out of this environment that a young Viswanathan Anand came up, first becoming world junior champion, and then, of course, India's very first grandmaster. And what's amazing is that decades later, Anand brings it all full circle, founding his own academy and making that shift from being the star player to being a builder of the system itself.
But you know, Anand's impact went way beyond just the 64 squares. In a country that's, let's be honest, often focused on cricket, he became this whole new kind of hero, an intellectual superstar. He completely shattered a psychological barrier. He proved that an Indian player could be the absolute best in the world in what was, for a long time, seen as a European and Soviet game. And that feeling of it's possible, that was the real game changer. It mobilized not just the kids, but maybe more importantly, their parents, who suddenly saw chess as a legitimate, even prestigious career path.
Now, inspiration is one thing, but how do you turn that inspiration into a real, tangible system? Well, the next piece of the puzzle was absolutely crucial. They had to figure out how to remove the enormous financial risk that for most families made pursuing a professional chess career a huge, huge gamble.
And this gets to what is arguably India's single biggest competitive advantage. They've created what we're calling a de-risked career path. Think of it like a multi-layered financial safety net. It's woven together by the state, by big government-owned companies, and even private supporters. And what it does is transform chess from this risky, precarious passion into a stable, secure, and genuinely viable middle-class profession. So how does this safety net actually work? Well, you can think of it as a four-step pyramid. Right at the bottom, at the grassroots level, you've got the National Federation giving direct financial stipends to kids. Then, the next layer up, state governments chip in with cash rewards for winning. For the absolute top prospects, the central government has an elite program that offers monthly scholarships and personalized training. And then, the top of the pyramid, the final and maybe most powerful layer of all, a guaranteed corporate job, for life.
And just take a look at the numbers here. The All India Chess Federation, the AICF, has a stipend scheme that gives direct quarterly payments to top-performing kids, starting from the under 7 category. Think about that. This is an absolute game changer. It tackles those early costs head-on, the coaching, the travel, the very things that usually force so many talented kids to drop out before they even have a chance to make it.
And that brings us to the capstone of this entire system, the guaranteed job. We're talking about state-owned giants, companies like Indian Railways, Indian Oil. They offer top players jobs under what's called a sports quota. And this isn't just some token position either. It comes with a solid middle-class salary, full benefits, and this amazing perk called special casual leave. That basically means they can train and compete year-round, full-time, while still drawing a regular paycheck. So the big takeaway here is that India has completely rewritten the risk-reward equation for chess.
It's no longer just a passion, it's a profession.
Okay, so we've talked about the financial what. We see how the system is funded and de-risked, but how are these champions actually made? Let's dive into the educational how, the unique coaching methods, and the institutions that have basically become India's champion crafting factories.
Now, at the very heart of the Indian method is a really interesting philosophical difference. You know, a lot of traditional Western approaches focus heavily on memorizing opening theory and using computer engines for analysis. But the Indian method, which has been championed by legendary coaches like R.B. Ramesh, is different. It puts the focus squarely on raw calculation. Ramesh is famous for his engine-free training camps, where he basically forces his students to build their own analytical muscle, to strengthen their own ability to calculate and visualize, instead of just leaning on a machine to give them the answers.
And you can really see this philosophy in action when you look at certain schools. This quote here says it all, really. It's from a former student of the Vellamel School in Chennai, and it just perfectly captures their revolutionary approach. It shows you that this is an institution that gets it. They understand that to create a world champion, you might have to bend the traditional rules of education a little.
Because Vellamel isn't just a school that happens to have a good chess club. It's a full-blown chess factory. The best young players get 100% tuition waiver. They get flexible attendance, which means they can travel and compete internationally for months on end. The school even sponsors them directly for tournaments. And the most famous story? When D. Gukesh was preparing for the World Championship and needed a powerful supercomputer, the school approved it in 2 days. That's just an incredible level of institutional commitment.
But beyond the schools and the federations, there's another pillar holding all this up, one you don't always see, and that's the incredible all-in sacrifice of the families. In India, a child's chess career is a family project. You have stories of fathers like Dr. Rajanidkanth, a successful surgeon who literally gave up his medical practice to manage his son Gukesh's career. You have mothers like Nagalakshmi, who travels the globe with her kids, Pragnananda and Vaishali, famously carrying a rice cooker so they can have home-cooked meals on the road. This all-in commitment is really the human engine that drives the entire machine.
Okay, for our final section, let's pull all these different threads together. We're going to try and synthesize this into a clear formula for India's success. But just as important, we also need to look at the other side of the coin, the challenges, the pressures, and the potential cracks in this amazing machine.
So if you boil it all down, what's the formula? As you can see here, it's not any one single thing. It's a powerful convergence of factors. You've got the cultural DNA, a deep-seated respect for intellectual achievement. You've got the icon, Viswanathan Anand, who isn't just a hero from the past but an active mentor. You've got that unique pedagogy we talked about. You have the mobilization of families, which is fueled by that promise of a de-risked career. And holding it all together is the support, a huge convergence of government money and corporate backing.
And this chart really drives home where the geographical heart of this system is. Now, talent is popping up all over India for sure, but the southern state of Tamil Nadu, and the city of Chennai in particular, is the undisputed epicenter. This Chennai cluster, as some call it, is responsible for about 1/3 of all of India's grandmasters. It's created this incredible, self-sustaining ecosystem of top coaches, academies, and non-stop, high-level competition.
However, it's not all a perfect success story. The system definitely has its risks and challenges. There have been issues with administrative instability in the National Federation. There's a very noticeable gender gap, with way fewer girls reaching the top levels. You also have to consider the immense pressure put on these kids from a super young age. We're talking 5 or 6 years old, which creates a real risk of burnout. And finally, as we just saw, that success is very geographically lopsided, with the north of the country still lagging way behind the south.
And all of this leaves us with one last really important question to think about. There's no doubt that India has created a blueprint, a formula for producing chess champions with incredible efficiency. The results are undeniable. But while we admire the champions, the end product of this machine, we also have to look closely at the process itself. And we have to ask, what is the human cost of running such a high-pressure, high-stakes national project?